is Kate, and I like to explain things. Today, I would like to attempt to explain asexuality and aromanticism. And somebody who experiences the spectrum of both. But yeah, just a quick and easy thing, right? Explaining how you see things and experience things differently than other people. So, yeah. The cliff notes are that asexuality is like this idea that sex isn't the be-all end-all for you. And then I think the quickest way to explain aromanticism is you don't catch feelings. But, I've explained these things to enough non-ace and aro people to understand that doesn't necessarily compute, which when people don't get you, that's kind of a good indicator that you're queer, right? Like, I've had one conversation in my essentially 30 years now of life describing why I know I'm attracted to the people I'm attracted to, and that's because I'm straight. And in that conversation, yeah, it was super vague and not important, and I didn't have to describe or justify anything, versus like people who are ace and aro have to justify a lot to people, including, this one very well-meaning person's like question of whether or not an aromantic person experiences love at all. Which I think when you point it out, makes itself clear as to why that's a silly thing to think. But I don't, being generous and being, like, genuinely, like, I had to unpack a lot of things to get to where I am now, and yeah, we conflate romantic love with a lot of things in our society. And it's not somebody's fault that they haven't unpacked the idea that romantic love is different than friendship, and that friendship is actually the basis of 90% of relationships. When you get down to it, because friendship's about mutual respect in ways that other types of attachment aren't. So when you're talking about being a soft person, being somebody who's open to relationships and open to new people, who is interested in other people, who wants to pour into other people and be poured into themselves, who says that has to be a romantic relationship? And in fact, having a distinct lack of interest in the romantic side of things could be beneficial. Personally, I have found a lot of clarity in terms of the romantic relationships I don't pursue a lot of romantic relationships, but I have a lot of clarity in this arena that I think comes from the idea that there's not this fluffy urge that other people describe. This like, oh, I just want to be around you. And I do want to be around you. But like, it's because you're cool, not because like there's this this just vibe. Well, actually, vibes don't even make it either. Anyway, I don't need to explain. I don't need to explain other people's experiences of love, I guess. But personally, I haven't had to unpack the idea that I'm just sexually attracted to somebody or I'm just romantically attracted to somebody, because those two things kind of go together for me, and it's mostly about friendship anyway. So do I want to be around you? Sure. When you're talking about an intimate relationship, a relationship where both people see each other, have mutual respect, allow for mistakes to be made, and have a vested interest in continuing a relationship after those mistakes have been made. That sounds like friendship to me. I guess as somebody who's aroace, this idea that we should be chasing a romantic relationship has just never tracked. It's never tracked for me because also none of the people I learned from as a young person described long-term romantic relationships as anything other than friendship. From what I've heard described about long-term relationships, it's really all about friendship. Which I guess makes a lot of sense for why, though I'm trying to talk about ace and aro sexualities, I'm mostly talking about friendship. Well, what can I say? What I see as friendship is just simply the basis of all relationships. And you add the extra things. And I guess that's maybe a good time to just explain that I'm actually demisexual. So that is to say, it's not that I have a bad feeling or an apathy towards sexual relationships. It's that I don't think that compared to other people, I would really willing to engage in those kinds of relationships without a solid foundation in knowing you as a person and knowing who you are and enjoying that enough to be in a space where I want that from you. And that's super vague. A lot of times when people hear demisexuals explain who they are, people are like, well, isn't that true for everybody? And I think, yeah, to an extent, but like, I'm unwilling to consent. I'm unable to give consent, affirmative, enthusiastic consent to a sexual experience unless I know you as a human being. And I think when people break down, especially in a sex positive situation, when they break down the feeling of safety versus the feeling of emotional intimacy, which is what I would be looking for, is emotional intimacy and safety, obviously, because but like this idea that some people just need to feel safe for them to want to experience a sexual situation. I need emotional intimacy in order to even really want to pursue something. And then on the other side of things, the thing that complicates it, because there's lots of demisexuals who have dated a lot more than I have, and have had long-term relationships and all that sort of stuff. But I'm also gray romantic. So the queer concept of grayness is this idea that it comes and goes. It doesn't necessarily have firm boundaries. It's kind of just there sometimes. And there are other times, and not here now. And for me, that experience describes and jives really well with my forays into romanticness. Because, I have experienced, crushes. I get crushes. These people, the warm feeling, the happy feeling, the excited feeling, and all that sort of thing. But, once that goes away, do I want to be around you anymore? It just comes and goes. It isn't the rhyme or reason of this for me is just, I don't know. It really explains my lived experience, which is I just don't care about dating. It's not something I do because it's not something I'm interested in. It's a 50-50 no, that's not even true. It's like a 70-30 shot that if I was even to go on a first date, that I would want to pursue a romantic relationship with somebody who I chose to go on a first date with. Most of the time I just want to be buddies. And sometimes asexual and aromantic people will talk about it as this is the sexuality, and that's it. It's not about being straight or not straight anymore because you're ace. It's a third thing, and I get that, but I'm a straight woman. That is to say, I'm primarily interested in men, and non-binary applicants can inquire within, which I think is true for everyone, but I know it's true for me. I have found it really interesting as somebody who's come out to herself, because I was never in the closet. Essentially my life has not changed since acquiring these labels. I've just given myself more permission to be who I have always been. But now I feel so much less pressure to make something happen for these men. Because previous to having these identities that have told me this isn't a big deal for you. You can just be buddies. Even people you're attracted to, sometimes it's just you're attracted to them as a person, and because you're straight and society tells you to act a certain way and to think a certain way and value relationships a certain way, you might think, oh, I have a crush on this person, or I have this is a romantic situation, which is just it doesn't have to be. For me, anyway. And that has been so freeing, because for the longest time, I would put myself in, I would spend a lot of time not being in these situations, not dating, not trying to go out on dates. And then when I would, when I found myself at a party flirting with somebody long enough that by the end of the night they're like, what's gonna happen? Something's gonna happen. We've been flirting all night. And I don't blame them. We were flirting all night. And my thought at the time was, well, what's gonna happen? I don't know. This is what you do at parties. You flirt with people, and then like, amatonormative, like, the allosexuals, the people who aren't ace or aro, the allosexuals, something happens for them. They, like, connect the dots. I was just never somebody who connected the dots, and I felt really bad because I felt like I was leading people on, and there's a really long history of women being shamed for leading people on, that being a bad thing. I think this idea that it's mean to be a tease was instilled in me at the same time as this very clear training I got as somebody who grew up in the Christian tradition that you are not. You are entirely in control of your body and what it does with other people, which was a good thing to teach people. It's the second half of that statement that is bad, which is, it's your fault if something happens. No, it takes two to tango, and also sometimes you don't consent anyway, and sometimes you've been manipulated, and, yeah, but in a non-abusive situation, it's very clear that a Christian woman is supposed to be the person who stops things. So at the same time, I was somebody who didn't really understand what her end game was, which my end game was flirting. And now I know that. So the vibe I give off is different in these situations. But I no longer feel pressured by anyone, including myself, to engage more than I want to. For a long time, I didn't understand how much I was letting other people's expectations guide me in these situations, because I've never been somebody, I wasn't raised to be, I'm like second generation of this woman. My grandfather was, according to my aunts, my aunts always said that, he wanted us to have an education post high school, which is a big deal because this is the 70s. This is a man who grew up in the 40s. He wanted his daughters to have an education after high school so that they could support themselves if the man didn't turn out to be worth anything. And that didn't happen for most of my aunts, but they were still raised that way. And my dad was raised in that environment where girls are supposed to do something after high school. My dad went into a female-dominated industry, and after being raised by sisters, was very keen on us being independent people who thought for ourselves. And my mom is a feminist and has been forever, and they are very much on the same page with that. So I was not raised thinking that I needed to be married to be a full human being. I don't have a lot of shame at all. I feel very free about being a single person. The thing that I feel, and I think this is apparent in a lot of my videos, the thing that I feel weighed down by is financial things that everybody is, and the idea that to be a middle-class person you have to have 2 incomes. But I don't want to live alone anyway, so it's just about safety and, finding somebody who wants that with me. Finding somebody I want to live with and who wants to live with me, whether or not it's a romantic relationship, I think, is where I've landed. And because of that, all those things, I didn't notice that when I was flirting and having lots of fun, and then getting to the end of the night and being like, I was just flirting and having fun. That was an indicator that I was different from other people. The only other thing that I would mention at this time is that it would have been hard for me to want to date somebody. I don't care about that. I so don't care about that, and I've never cared about that. The competition, the weird posturing, like, there's no reward for me at the end of the line. I don't think anyone really likes dating, but there are people who see that there will be a reward for them at the end of the line. I don't, because I'm fulfilled by my friendships, clearly. So, yeah, I just didn't find that particularly interesting to do. So I knew this about myself, and as an adult, I kind of expected things to just suddenly change. And they didn't, because I've always known myself. Somebody recently described me very in a extremely neutral way as painfully self-aware. So things aren't necessarily a surprise for me, even when I haven't really been set up for success to accept things. And so I knew, even though my concept of demisexuality and asexuality, and I had no concept of aromanticism, I knew that I wasn't consenting to these experiences post-flirting. And eventually, I gained an understanding that what I had previously thought was the benchmark for demisexuality was maybe the benchmark for asexuality, because it's all a spectrum. And then, to be honest, Amp from What's the Safe Word, gay man who has done sex work, said, "Hey, well, here's the thing, I'm demi." It sounds like somebody who had a very different but similar experience from me and to me, said, "Hey, here's the thing, you can do this." So I guess my goal in this ramble has been to show people beyond the definitions what it's like to come to conclusions about yourself with regard to your interest in romantic and sexual situations and relationships, and ultimately do what Amp did for me, which is say, yeah, you can identify this way. That is a thing that is an option that is available to you. And It's so liberating. It's just great. It's so much better than being confused. There's a lot of people I've talked to who are ace, because I've mostly met people who are ace. A lot of people who grew up feeling bad about how they experience the world. I'm very lucky in that I was never pressured ever to be anything but demisexual, because they want us all to be demisexual. They want us to... Purity culture raises you to be asexual. But explicitly they do, because they're saying all sex is bad. But... that's implicitly, sorry, my bad. Explicitly, they want you to be demisexual, which is, say, you are not interested in having sex with anybody until you're in love with that person, and you're not going to have sex with that person until you're married to that person. And those two things happen pretty simultaneously, because as soon as you're in love with somebody, you should be marrying them, right? It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's dumb. I'm a demisexual Christian. I think that's a dumb way to live your life. And, like, it's not actually dumb. Pretty clearly, it's just what happens for some people. But to say that it's true for everyone is not acceptable, because it's not true at all for the vast majority of people. The vast majority of people. And this is years before I identified, like maybe 10 years, not true, but like 8 years. 8 years before I identified as demisexual, I knew there was a difference between me, and a quantifiable difference between me and somebody who equally was raised in the situation I was maybe even more dedicated to staying pure than me, and yet had sex with their boyfriend before they were married. And a lot of those situations, I think, are only had dubious consent from those people, because the way that they described it is dubious to me. Sounds suspicious. But ultimately, like, I've never been in a situation like that. Because I was never curious. I was never interested in having a boyfriend, in a boyfriend, the concept, enough to be with somebody who would have that expectation from me. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. It's actually, like, led to some really, really sad times where I felt extremely lonely, because there was a point in my life where, for the first time in my life, I was the only single person I was close with. Which led to the only time I've ever dated, technically been somebody could consider my boyfriend. And if the stumbling over the words wasn't clear enough, that lasted a week. And then I learned from it. And I continued to find out I am different from other people. So, to continue to wrap up, if you feel different from other people, try out the label. Or don't. Like, seriously, lots of people don't. And I think it cuts you off from community. But some people find community in other ways, and that's perfectly valid, so whatever. But, like, I don't know. I unintentionally filmed this whole thing while wearing Ace Pride colors, so what can I tell you? There's more of us than maybe even we think, and I love that for us. I give you permission. Identify on the Ace and Arrow spectrum. You can. You have my permission. And you don't need it. So, if you feel different from other people, okay. Maybe find out why. Or not. I'm still okay. I still like to explain things. I don't know if I have, but I'll find that out. And in the meantime, tell your friends you love them.